Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out. So we're going to do a little talk. We call it the Brown Jazz Talks, a little talk before the concert. My name is Timo Vollbrecht. I'm the director of jazz studies, and the gentlemen next to me here are two amazing people. Well, we have Ed Tomassi in the blue suit, who is long-standing faculty here and who is so amazing to cover for me while I'm on parental leave this semester. And, well, the person next to me probably needs no introduction, but it's the great Joe Lovano, who is here on campus today. So we're going to talk a little bit, and this is just going to, well, we've actually been doing this for the past 2 hours over dinner, so this is just a continuation of what we did. But we want to, take the advantage of having Joe here, who has been such a force over the past decades on the jazz scene, and he's one who is in and will be in the jazz history books forever. So it's just such an amazing honor to have him here. Somebody who's been on the scene since the 70s. And I think to kick this off, there's a story, a little anecdote that I don't think, Joe, you will remember, but around like 10 years ago more, I was at a barbecue summer party at your house. Mantis Evert took me from Blue Note Records, and we got there early. I think we were the first people to arrive, and you were by the pool. We joined you by your pool, and you were listening to Coltrane on a little tape recorder. And then the barbecue people came. It was all musicians, and we had food. And then Joe said, "Okay, let's jam." And we went into your music room, and I think I was there for 5 more hours, and you never left that room. You were playing on every instrument with everybody. And to me, this was really inspiring because, man, you're living it. Like, you're in it, and the music, it's like, comes through you. And one of the things that inspired me is because it kind of showed me that, and I'm assuming this is all about relationships and community for you. And I'm just wondering what, your thoughts are in like this music with people and being in this lineage.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to share some music and to collaborate with this university's ensemble. It was a great band, and Timo and Ed, the way you guys put all this music together and rehearsed and put so much love into it, which is what it's about, the passion and the love and the idea about jazz. Because jazz is an idea about how to communicate together with the ensemble and for the folks, and relationships, like you alluded to, is really everything in your life. I mean, we live in the blessed world of music, and that is a blessing for everyone. And you have to treasure that, And the music you make with people, just in your family and in your life, it really gives you the foundation to try to be expressive on an instrument or within this music, jazz music, which is about creating music within the music. And yeah. And I remember that party. Because that's one yearly kind of event that might happen at our place. I live in the woods, about an hour north of New York City these days, and just getting together with friends and colleagues and playing together and enjoying each other, That's the whole idea of having a gathering like that for us, Of course, there's other kind of gatherings throughout the year, different holidays and different things, but that one party that you ended up coming to was a real musician's party.
Yeah, Michael Abini was there, Drew Gress was there, all those cats were there.
Oh, there was a
playing,
bunch
yeah.
of folks there, yeah. And through the years, a lot of people that I've worked with and stuff. And you mentioned our friend Mantis, who at the time was working for Blue Note Records, which I was under contract with Blue Note Records from the early 90s until 2015 was my last release. So I had quite an amazing period in my life to documenting music and having the embrace of Bruce Lundvall, Michael Kuskuna, and others, Arif Martin. And Mantis was on the staff there with maybe 10 or 15 other folks. Some of them were probably at that party also, you know. That might have had a little Blue Note vibrations that day, you know.
So, is this on, I guess? Yeah. So I got a little story about Joe. He's never going to remember, but it was about 1972. I had hit Boston and, at Berkeley College. And was hanging out in ensemble rooms at night, checking out players. I had another saxophone player I used to hang with, Kim. And checking out some ensembles. There's Gary Burton ensemble going on. You hear this cat in this room playing, navigating through these deceptive kind of changes. So I said to my friend Kim, I says, who is this guy? Who is this? You know, we thought we were pretty cool because we had some Charlie Parker licks down and stuff like that. But we're listening to this window, looking at this cat, navigating through these, awkward kind of changes. So the next day, my friend Kim comes up to me and goes, hey, I met that guy in the room. His name's Joe. I says, yeah. I says, what's the story with Joe? He goes, yeah, I talked to him about articulation. He's telling me about some stuff, articulation. I said, oh, cool, So, I was getting a little upset about, I got to start navigating through these hard changes now myself. So, okay, took care of that. 1976 comes along. I'm doing a gig at the Viking Hotel with my friend Jeff Stout, trumpet player. Woody Herman's band's in town. So my friend Jeff goes, oh yeah, there's some of the cats that got to sit in with the band. I said, oh, cool, nice. Joe Lovano's sitting in the band. We're doing all the things you are. You'll never remember this, man. You'll never remember this. Now Joe's playing all this wide interval stuff. So I'm like, gee, I just started navigating through those deceptive changes. Now this cat's going in with this wide interval kind of stuff. So I was like, oh, okay. So all right, now wide intervals. Okay, wide intervals. Okay. All right, 1980, early 80s comes along. I'm hanging out with my friend in New York. We're hitting the clubs, the Village Vanguard, happen to go into Sweet Basil's. Joe Lovano's in there with Kenny Werner, and they're playing The Song Is You, Faster Than Fast. And I'm like, no, Joe Lovano's playing some different stuff again. So I'm like, oh no, I think I gotta check that out. But my point is, Joe, so in every art form, there's imitation. We all have to go through that. And then there's assimilation, where, we try to do things like what's been done in our own way. But the third step is the innovation, which some people never reach. But right here, he innovated his own style right here. Articulation, sound, and it's influenced a lot of tenor players, saxophone players, piano players, guitar players. And he went to the third step, and you never really find that. And I could be walking down the hallway with my eyes shut, 10 tenor saxophone players, and I'll know it's Joe. And that's what it's all about, with creating the art form. So, yeah, cool. I don't know if you remember those. I know you know Jeff Stout.
Thank you, Ed. Well, 1972, I went to Berklee College of Music. 1971, I was out of high school, and that's that period you're speaking about. I was placed in one of Gary Burton's.
I remember the room 115.
Well, I remember the room also in awe of Gary Burton, man, and he was bringing in all this great music that he was recording, and things with Chick Corea and Keith Jarrett and others, you know, and really challenging us to play with interpretation and inside the music, you know. And it's amazing because today I hold a Gary Burton chair in jazz performance at Berklee, and it's quite an honor through the years to have his embrace from that really young age, in that early time, you know. We met during that period, and George Garzone and Billy Pierce and others studied with Joe Viola, a great, incredible saxophonist. And John Laporta was there, and Gary, Andy McKee, some great Joe Hunt. But at the time, in that class, was John Schofield and Bill Frisell and Kenny Werner and Mike Stern and Joey Barron and a whole crowd of folks. To get back to the relationships, that's when we all met and first played together, and we're still doing things together to this day, and have collaborated in all kinds of settings. And Bill Frisell and I joined the Paul Motion Band in 1981 and played for 30 years with Paul, Bill and I. He passed in 2011, and that experience was a springboard to everything for me as a leader and all, you know. But it seems like that springboard happens a lot throughout your life. There's different moments that you arrive to that send you into the next moment, you know. This 1976 with the Woody Herman Band, that's when I joined Woody's band. I was 23. I had just moved to New York, and there was an opening in the band, and I had met Joe Lovano, who was from Rochester, New York, and along with Sal Nestico and other players, they played in Woody's band in the 60s, like 10 years prior. And there was a whole bunch of saxophone players, Don Menza and Nick Brignola and Sal and Joe.
I think Paul Fontaine was on the band too, trumpet player.
He was on the band at that period
And
with
Wilson.
Sal and Phil Wilson.
And
who-
Kenny Wenzel.
Yeah, there was a
He's a
whole,
local.
and a bunch of cats from Boston, you know. So anyway, they called Joe to do this tour. It was Woody's 40th anniversary year, 1976, of being a band leader. And Joe didn't want to go back on the road, and I had just met him, and we had played together. I gave him my number where I was staying in New York City, and all of a sudden I got a call from the road manager, Bill Byrne. He was one of the trumpet players in the band, that Joe had recommended me, and would I have eyes to fly out to St. Louis. So I did, and I stayed on the band about almost 3 years. You know, 1976 to the beginning of 79, you know. And that's where I first played with Frank Tiberi, and was turned on to all kinds of incredible conceptions about major thirds and resolving things and deceptive resolutions. And he used to talk about the 15 tones, and I was like always trying to figure out 15 tones. Wow.
I'm still asking. I still see. I'm still trying to figure out those 15 tones.
Yeah. And you know what? If you counted If you count it from an open C sharp down to a low B flat, I think that might be that 15 tones. I'm not sure what. but anyway, you know, just to stress, like, all the people you meet and play with and encounter give you ideas, and if you let the ideas come, and then you have to work at it to try to make it your own. So developing a sound is about developing an approach about playing music and to try to find your rhythm spirit. That we all have our own rhythm spirit. We all have our own melody within us. And to really tap into that concept and idea, I think is the journey that you're on, you know.
Since we are playing with a big band here, and you've done everything in all kinds of different formations and bands, but you also did a lot of big band. I mean, you played with Woody Herman, you played with Charlie Hayden, Mel Lewis.
Mel Lewis band.
So I'm just curious how, like, having that experience of being in a section and also soloing, maybe right after Frank or something, like, what does that do to you in developing your own sound?
Well, like I just mentioned, like you feed off of everybody around you, and you develop ideas, right, that come to you. But I was really fortunate. My dad played tenor saxophone and was a beautiful player and one of the leading players around Cleveland, Ohio when I grew up. So my whole life was listening to him, hearing what he was practicing and playing and the songs he was playing. And all my lessons were about repertoire, learning the instrument and all the elements that go with that, you know, playing in all 12 and learning the fundamentals, which never leave you, and how to play and blend with someone else, because I would practice with him, playing themes, melodies, and trying to play and match his power, the power of his voice, you know, and realizing that's what that was. So in my teenage years, I had a lot of beautiful moments just trying to share the space with him. And then, of course, his generation and the colleagues that he grew up around were all kinds of players, and saxophone players and trumpet players, guitar players, organ players. Some of the first rhythm sections I played with as a teenager were organ trios, because a lot of clubs didn't have a nice piano. But you could pull up to any club with an organ and a trailer and turn the corner tavern into a jazz spot. And that was happening in the 60s when I was coming up as a kid. So that was also part of developing a sound with no PA system, playing with an organ, with the Leslie speaker and a drummer, and trying to project and not even thinking, oh, I miss a mic, because you never had the experience playing into a mic in the first place. So that was really great. And then there was another close friend of my dad's, a few years older than my dad. His name was Hank Gear, and he had a club. He played alto and trumpet. He was a real Benny Carter disciple, right? And if you know anything about Benny Carter, he was a great, incredible musician. He actually started, he was one of the first African-American cats to go out to California, and at the beginning with movie scores and TV shows in Hollywood and all that. He was one of the first cats that everybody followed him out there, Quincy Jones included, Oliver Nelson and Benny Golson.
Trumpet,
Yeah, Benny, he was alto and trumpet. And he's on some Jazz at the Philharmonic with Coleman Hawkins and Ben Webster, Lester Young, Charlie Parker. And anyway, Hank Gear was from that school. And he had this club So there were jam sessions, and when I got my driver's license, I started to go myself. First, my dad brought me. It was like a Wednesday night or something. First, I went with my dad. Then when I got my license, I started to go myself. And then he had a saxophone section and rhythm section band, like a super sax kind of a band, if you know what super sax was. They played only Charlie Parker solos and transcriptions and stuff. Hank's didn't do that, but it was a saxophone section, rhythm section, playing some great arrangements. Some that Hank wrote and others, you know, Lenny Niehaus and different arrangers, you know. So on Sunday afternoons, going there and sitting in with a saxophone section. This is before I went to Berkeley, so I had already an idea about playing with other saxophone players in a section and trying to blend and play my part within the music and tone-wise trying to support the lead alto or whoever was playing lead, but usually you follow that lead alto player, you know? So that led me to just, I don't know, playing in some bands. The Woody Herman Band was really first. And, well, George Garzone and a bunch of Berkeley cats had, in 1973, they were playing Tom Jones, right? The singer Tom Jones. You hip to him? So he had, the saxophones were from Berkeley. It was the Jeff Sturgis and Universe was the band. And it was one of the first fusion kind of big bands. They were backing Tom Jones. And saxophone section was from Boston. George Garzone in there, Vinnie Pinella, Carl Hausborn, remember Carl?
Yes.
Yeah? Carl. Now that's far out. So, he could tell you the story too. Anyway, he gets another gig. He went on the last 6 weeks of a long tour. They were on the road like the whole year, so 1973. Carl goes out with another band, right? Playing Gilbert O'Sullivan. So he gets this other show, and he can't do the last 6 weeks of the tour. Garzone calls me and says, "Hey, man, there's a chair open if you want to come out." So that was the first time I flew to meet a band. Was that? And it was 2 weeks at Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas. So that was kind of far out. And my Uncle John, just to throw this in, my Uncle John, one of my dad's older brothers, he went to Vegas when it first started, and he was a dealer at the Desert Inn during the Rat Pack with Sinatra period. So my Uncle John, he was living in Palm Springs. He came. George met my Uncle John. Oh, it was so funny, man. Anyway, that was kind of the beginning of some big band stuff. Went to Woody's band, and then 1980, after I left the band, I got the gig with the Mel Lewis, Thad Jones Mel Lewis band, and Thad had just moved to Copenhagen, and Bob Brookmeyer came. And I stayed on that band from 1980 to 91, playing every Monday night at the Vanguard and touring some, recording a lot, and living in New York, playing at the Vanguard every Monday, man. That was incredible. And playing this amazing music of Bob Brookmeyer and Thad Jones. You know? So.
How was working with Woody's? They said it was like a very happy, good vibe band compared to like Buddy's band.
Woody's. Well, I think Buddy's band was a little more military-like. You had to, if you had that chair, that gig, that was you played your part, and that was it. Where Woody's band attracted a lot of players, and he would discover who you were and feature you. And I think that's why, through the years, Woody attracted some folks that were really serious about being themselves and more more improvisers. And the heritage in that band went from Flip Phillips and Stan Getz and Zoot Sims and Al Cohn and Jimmy Jeffries and all kind of Sal Nestico and bunches of folks.
How about Mel Lewis?
Mel also was like, okay, so Mel and Thad started that band in 1966. And Thad Jones, Mel Lewis band, and that was like the premier band of some new music and some incredible arrangements. And Mel, when you played with Mel, he made you feel like it was your band. So whoever was soloing at the time, and also Thad had that vibe too. Like I never really worked under Thad's conducting, except when I first sat in and subbed for someone, right? Then Thad was gone, but I heard the band a lot with Thad conducting through the years, and that's how it felt. If Pepper Adams was playing a solo, it was his band, man.
How was Pepper? I met Pepper.
And Joe Farrell, you know.
I met Pepper in 1978, and he said, I mean, this is a weird story, of course. They broke into his apartment. They stole everything but the Barry sax. Said he had it on
Too
the
heavy.
bed. It was on the bed. He took everything else and they left the horn.
Lucky for all of us. For him.
So he did, and his stuff with Lee Morgan.
Well, Pepper Adams was from Detroit and grew up with Thad and Hank Jones and Donald Byrd and the whole Detroit crowd with Frank Foster and all these folks talk about relationships. And then they all went to New York together also. And Pepper Adams was one of the great improvisers in the music, played the baritone saxophone and really had an amazing voice on the instrument.
Because nobody was really playing it like that. That sound, right?
No, he had his own approach. And it was from the company that he kept, when he was coming up, too.
Joe, when I listen to you, one of the things that I love so much about your playing is I think you're such a melodic player. And I actually remember when I studied with you at NYU, there's like one thing that I remember to this day. We were playing Ask Me Now, and you told me, man, you got to sing this melody, and be confident doing it. And I'm just wondering, when you approach a melody, and I also heard that you're inspired by titles. What is it? Let's say you're gonna play, say it over and over again tonight. What is it? How do you approach something like that? And how do you make it sing like that?
Okay, well, the title thing. Ed mentioned a song called All the Things You Are. You play that song every time you play your instrument. No matter what song you're playing, you play that title, All the Things You Are. And I think Lee Konitz had that in his approach, letting the title give you ideas. But just that title, All the Things You Are, you're exploring everything that you've ever studied or listened to or heard, But that whole lyrical thing is coming from being inspired and influenced by some great players like Stan Getz and Charlie Parker and Lester Young, Ben Webster, Sonny Rollins, John Coltrane. I mean, you can name, and every name that you name, you could hear their approach and sound, Joe Henderson or Michael Brecker, or somebody that was really played with a deep emotion within their vibrations, And for me, it was also fortunate to be in some of those big bands and playing with some amazing singers that tell a story, man. Tom Jones, in his style or his way, spoke the truth, what he was singing about, But playing with Woody's band, had a chance to play with Sarah Vaughan, for example, or Tony Bennett, Joe Williams. With Mel also, with the band, John Hendricks and Tony Bennett. Again, Peggy Lee. We played one time, we did a concert backing up all these singers that, there was a radio station in New York that it's not with us now, but it had its 50th year anniversary. What was that radio station? And it was all about singers. And we played behind all these folks, Mel Torme and Peggy Lee. She sang that tune, I Got It Bad and That Ain't Good. That title will tell you something about trying to say that tune. She sang so slow, one chorus was like, do, do, dee, da, do, do, dee, da, oh, be, do, do, dee. I mean, one chorus took like, but it was so amazing to play that one chorus and listen to her and the way she said that tune. Because she sang it, but she said it also. And I learned a lot being in some saxophone sections in those kind of moments, you know.
What about Joe Williams?
And Joe Williams, too, the way he sang the blues and like told his story, beautiful. And Mel Torme also, who wrote all the arrangements, he knew every note. And rehearsing with him was a trip because he would start pointing at, you know, that third trombone player or whatever. You know, he says, that's a G. You know, he would tell, even if you played the G, he'd say, yeah, that's, you know. But he knew every note. And that was a little challenging. That was trippy, yeah.
There's a story, a Joe Williams story. He's down North Texas State, got to play with the big band down there. Jeff Hamilton's playing drums, I guess. So the 1 O'Clock Band, which is a great band. So we got Joe Williams going on. We're going to burn him up. We're going to burn this cat down. Joe Williams comes in the band. 1, 2. Yeah. They couldn't play it. Slower than slow.
But this is one of the other things I love about Joe's, like your freedom within the beat and like in all these kinds of tempos. When I was in college, there was this video going around, I remember, of you, I think it was giving a master class at Berkeley, where you showed, and this was so inspiring, where you tap your foot on each quarter note and improvise, and then on the half notes, and then on the, like every 4, and then like every 4 bars. And like every time you changed it, like your whole perception to the beat changed. And like it's one of the things, like when Joe plays, it's just like so free, like rhythmically, right?
Studying that idea and concept really taught me a lot about how to accent. Because if you play 8th notes off the quarter note, you're going to accent a certain way. If you play 16th notes off the half note, even though it's like the same value or something, you accent different, feeling the bigger beat. And that's coming from how drummers play, and piano players play and accompany themselves, you know. But what I'm really realizing now is to play in a real polytonal way, where every note is in every key, and in a polyrhythmic way where all tempos are in every tempo. That's what I'm kind of studying these days, and trying to put that application into the approach about phrases and trying to say something.
It kind of reminds me of this like recent work you've been doing with the trio a little bit, Trio Tapestry. It's like harmonically, it's so interesting, and you shared some of the scores with me. I'm actually also curious about your writing process, because some of the, you don't have bar lines sometimes, and not even stems, and some of these recent charts, how do you write a piece? This might be a weird question, but because there are so many different ways, right? But like, do you have a routine, and how do you approach that?
Different groups different repertoire comes into it, you know, that you focus on the personnel and how everybody plays. And during the pandemic, I spent that time like kind of writing a lot of ideas and phrases and practicing a certain way. And I started to write sequences of tones with no stems and no bar lines, like you mentioned. But a sequence of tones that had them. If you just played them down one way, there's a melody. If you change the rhythm and put spaces, it's another melody. Every time you do that, it's a whole other piece of music, you know? And then the different ways you could start in the middle and go from the center to the left, or from the center to the right, or from right to left. There's a lot of ways to play those same sequence of tones in a different order or whatever, you know what I mean? I started to work on that idea, and a lot of the compositions for my trio, which is piano, drums, and saxophone, some of those melodies and things took shape from that approach, you know? And I've been learning a lot, and also every time you play, once you have a certain repertoire with a band and you start to really breathe together, a vocabulary starts to happen, and you listen and make the rhythm come together within those sounds. You know?
So do you start, so there's 5 elements, so you can start with melody first. I'm sure that's what you're kind of talking about. Or rhythm first, right?
Well, yeah, the sequence of tones has an order to them that creates a melody. And then without the stems, all of a sudden, then you have to feel the rhythm and the tempo and how you could explore that.
Okay. What about, do you usually start with harmony? Ever start with harmony first?
Sure.
Yeah.
I might write a sequence of a harmonic sequence with the bass tone, the root of the voicing or chord, right? But then that's the same idea about. Then I might put and then I improvise over that harmonic sequence, and find melodies and things.
Yeah. How about starting with just form first? No preconceived melody or rhythm, just starting with form.
Well, like to write a score with no notes, or a sequence of events, like start medium tempo, you know, and then move into a bright tempo. And then the next thing is going to be a slow tempo. And then back to the medium tempo, and having a score like that. Now you have to completely improvise the harmony and the melody, but you're following a score of dynamics. So yeah, I work on stuff like that too.
So actually you could even start with color first, which is dynamics or range. And start composing just thinking about the texture rather than a melody or rhythm right away.
You can do things like in the different registers. Like that first medium tempo is going to be in the upper part of your horn, right? And then when you move to a bright tempo, you're going to play in the middle to bottom of your horn for that quicker moment. And in the slow moment, you can play in another register, you know? And that's one thing from playing with Frank Tiberi, playing on Giant Steps with Woody's band. Frank would play choruses in 1 octave and twist and turn and then move that octave around the horn. I started to hear him do that, and I was like, oh, yeah, oh, okay. And then that got me into doing that, and some of the lessons and things. That's what I try to do with some students that come in that play real patternistic and in one direction. I'll restrict them. I say, yeah, well, don't go above a G and play a G with the octave to the low D, and only stay right there over the break of the horn, and just stay in there for a while.
I think there was a YouTube video you did on that. It was like,
It could have been. I might have covered
it
that idea
It
on
was
this
cool.
one video that we were talking
Yeah,
about
it was
rhythm,
cool.
you know. But I don't know. I only try to talk about things that I'm trying to experience and develop myself.
Speaking about giant steps, I think we have to make a step forward because it's almost showtime.
Oh,
I was just getting ready for a coffee.
Yeah, so I think we have 10 minutes, 15 minutes until we play.
Okay. Yeah.
Any last words?
does anyone have?
It's maybe one question, and then we move on. Anybody who has a burning question on their mind? Oh, many.
Can you comment on working with Charlie Hayden and the Liberation Orchestra?
Yeah. Well, that was another amazing experience playing in kind of a large ensemble setting. Playing with Paul Motion is how I met Charlie Hayden and that whole certain crowd, the Ornette Coleman School of Musicians, and in New York City, you know, and Carla Bley. I joined Carla Bley's band also in 1983, and that was the first encounter playing with Carla. And then she wrote everything for the Liberation Music Orchestra, Charlie Hayden ensemble that had Don Cherry and Dewey Redman, Makonda, Ken McIntyre on alto, played with Derek Dolphy and some folks, you know. Jim Pepper was in the band, and Pepper and I played together with Paul also. And then Pepper left the band, and it opened the door for me to join Charlie's band in 1986. And Paul Motion was on drums, Mick Goodrick, guitar, Jerry Allen, piano. Her and I kind of joined the band around the same time.
In that band, because it's such a political program, is like, did y'all talk about the meaning or like the protest songs that you did?
Well, a little bit, but Charlie chose material from South America and Portugal and Spain.
The Civil War
and
era.
the Civil War songs. The Liberation Music Orchestra, the first record was in the mid-'60s, was a protest, you know, against the troops in Angola and in Portugal, Charlie got arrested playing with Ornette Coleman and made some comment and started a riot at a concert. And the most beautiful thing about that band, actually, was, you know, there's some very simple, beautiful, poetic orchestrations that if you just played the chart down, it would be about 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes. And we would play 30 minutes on that. 3 minutes. The way we created our own inner parts and the way the different folks would take it. And you were really free inside the ensemble to create music within, you know. And then I had a chance to play with Charlie a number of times. And with Quartet West, I had a chance to sub for Ernie Watts, who was in the band. He was an incredible saxophone player. He's on the West Coast, and he was in L.A. He was on that Tonight Show band for like 20 years or something, you know. But Ernie, I think he might be in Arizona or somewhere now. He's somewhere. But anyway, it was a handful of gigs he would miss every now and then. And Charlie would call me to play with Quartet West, which was incredible, with Alan Broadbent on piano. And Lawrence Marable at first on drums, who played with Charlie Parker. Lawrence was something else. Dexter Gordon, he's on a lot of early Dexter Gordon stuff too. He might be on that record with Wardell Gray. Not sure. Lawrence Marable might be the drummer on that famous The Chase. Yeah.
Fantastic. Should we move on to some music? What do y'all think? Yeah? Yeah? Awesome.
Thanks for joining us. And Yeah, enjoy the set.